Buongiorno, guten Tag, salam alaikum. Today we have the honor and the pleasure to have a special guest. Rebiya Kadeer is an exceptional figure in the minority rights movement who has devoted her own life for the freedom and fundamental rights of the Uyghurs. The Uyghurs are an ethnically Turkish population, most of whom are Muslims, and who live in the autonomous region of Xinjiang, that in Chinese means new frontier, a new dominion. The region is also called East Turkestan. And the region is situated in the northeastern part of China. Considering the economic power of China, the Uyghurs movement can be maybe described as a sort of Goliath and David situation. If we just think of the debt that the US has with China or the latest Google case. The region of Xinjiang has borders with many countries, the former Soviet Union states as Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Afghanistan, but also with India and Pakistan. So the region is clearly placed in a political and military strategical position, but it's also placed in an economically strategical position for the oil and gas pipelines from Central Asia and for the natural resources of which the region is rich. The region has a population of approximately 17-20 million inhabitants, depending on the sources. And the Uyghurs are the largest ethnic group in the region, together with other approximately 12 ethnic groups. This territory has been independent in the past with the name of the Autonomous Republic of East Turkestan until the Chinese Han took control of this region after the Communist Revolution in 1949. Since then, the Chinese ethnically Han began arriving in large numbers through mechanism typical of colonial control, a sort of demographic engineering through incentives and other policies of the government that support the spread of Han language, culture, and economic power. The Han now make up at least 40% of the population in the region, compared with a 6% in 1949. In her biography, that has been described as a sort of epic-like heroic legend, the book has been published in different languages, including Italian and German, and this is the result of a number of interviews conducted by the German journalist Alexandra Cavelius, and in English has been recently published with a foreword of the Dalai Lama. And in his book, Rebiya Kadeer described not only her own story, but also the story of an entire population, the Uyghurs, and their suffering. And somehow, in this way, she follows what her parents has always told her, that you don't belong to us, the parents, but to the people, to our own people. Rebiya Kadeer, who is also mother of 11 children, has been a very successful businesswoman. She built an empire of trading companies and department stores, and she was also appointed to the China's national legislative body. At a certain point, she was even one of the richest person in China. China counting, you have to imagine, approximately 1 million and more inhabitants, and she was the richest woman in China. So business and money, as she said in her book, were her first contribution to the Uyghur movement, as money are, as she says, an essential element in the struggle for freedom. Rebiya Kadeer was not only a very successful businesswoman, but she was also an active philanthropist within the community, most notably through her foundation, 1,000 Feminist Mothers Project, a charity intended to help Uyghur women to start up their own local business. So business and money were considered to be a sort of means for the emancipation and empowerment of the individuals within the community, in particular of women. Since the 80s, she was very active, politically very active in defense of the Uyghurs, and her most important political engagement was a speech she gave before the Congress in Beijing, in which she, with a lot of courage, switched to the approved text and denounced openly the situation in the region. After this speech and the exile of her husband, an intellectual and political dissident, who in 1996 left China for the USA, Mrs. Kadeer's passport was seized and she was arrested by police. And in 1998, she was prevented from reappointment at the National Congress in Beijing. In August 1999, she was arrested on her way to meet a delegation from the US Congress with whom she wanted to complain about the situation of the political prisoners in the Uyghurs region. The Chinese government charged her with providing secret information to foreigners, even though these documents were publicly available. She was sentenced to 8 years imprisonment, then reduced by 1 year, and after 5 years, more than 5 years in jail, in a region where prison conditions are extremely harsh, under pressure from the United States and other international organizations, she was freed in 2005, officially on medical grounds. She was then quickly deported and sent into exile in the USA. In the USA, after a few months after her arrival, she survived to an attempt on her life, and her family back in China has been since then subjected to various forms of harassment, including detention. While in exile, she became the president of the World Uyghur Congress, an umbrella organization for 47 groups worldwide, based in Munich, and also of the Uyghur American Association, which represents approximately 1,000 or so Uyghurs in the United States. She has been also nominated 3 times for the Nobel Prize, for the Nobel Peace Prize. In 2000, when she was in jail, she received also the prestigious Human Rights Watch Award, and later also the Norwegian Rafto Prize for Human Rights. In spite of the suffering and violations taking place in the Uyghurs region, still this minority is not very known, as for instance, the Tibetans. In Italy, as in many other European countries, the Uyghurs got the headlines of the media for 2 recent circumstances: the clashes and disorders that occurred in the Uyghur region just before the Olympic Games in March 2008, causing more than some embarrassment before the international public opinion for the Chinese authorities in their attempts to present an image of a peaceful and democratic country. And secondly, the request by the US authority to transfer to some European countries, including Italy, some prisoners, some Uyghurs prisoners from Guantanamo prisons. In the end, only Albania accepted, and others were been transferred to Palau. The others refused directly or indirectly under the pressure of the Chinese authorities. These 2 stories illustrate very well the types of stories that our media select on minorities, stories that are often connected to violence, in particular if committed, somehow linked to the minority itself. Today, so we have the occasion to have a testimony from a leading figure of the Uyghur movement, who is herself the living example of how difficult and steep is the road for the affirmation and realization of human and minority rights. I apologize for having been so long, and now I give the floor to Mrs. Rebiya Kadeer.
Thank you. Ben sözlerini aldı bilen barlık bugünkü muşu sorunga uyuştuğun barlık teşkilatlarga ve muşu müşerriki hükümetin ismindesiniz buludu. Hükümetke çin ko'nglimda rahmet etmen ve şunun bilen birge bugün muşu sorunga mening xalqimga ve bizdek bir izilgen milletlerge ko'ngil bölüp muşu sorunga kelgen barlık o'quvchilar ve hanım efendimlerge çin ko'nglimda rahmet etmen.
First of all, I would like to thank the provincial government of South Tyrol and Mrs. Martha Stucker and also European Academy to invite me for this wonderful event. And I would also like to thank all of the audience that come here to listen to the story of my people.
Ben barlıq mening ahvalımni sizlarga tunishtirib o'tdi. Men o'zimning xalqimning ahvolini aytib o'tib ketay. Bizning ahvolimizni men sizlarga bunday tunishtirish uchun shu Tibetning ahvoli bilan o'xshash deb qarasanglar bo'ldi. Biz besib ilingan vaqtimiz Tibetdan 1 yil burun besib ilindik. Uning oldida o'zimiz ayrim bir yaşayan ayrım bir devlet ve millettik. 49.
So Roberta already explained briefly about the situation of my country and my people. And I would like to say that if you know about the Tibet, then you will learn more about the situation and fate of my people. Because the situation of our people is very similar to the Tibetan situation. The Chinese communists occupied East Turkestan, my land, 1 year before they occupied Tibet.
Lekin biz hazırgıça bu şundaq bir qattiq bir diktator devletinin astıda yaşap bir yoquluş girdavığı iştirilip atkan bolsaqmı avazımızını dünyaya anlatamadık.
Although my people suffered a lot under the Chinese rule, but we haven't had the chance to introduce our situation and suffering of our people to the international community.
Xitay hükümeti bizge 55-yili sizlarni yerlik milletler boğanlığınlar üçün biz besip algandan keyin Şinjan Uyghur Abdunum Rayın degan hukukni birimiz öz taqdiringlarni o'zinglar belgilaysizlar, o'zinglar taraq qilasizlar deb bizga abdunum hukuk bergan.
So after Chinese communists occupied East Turkestan, because we were the indigenous people of that land, they promised us that they will give a full autonomy to the region and guaranteed the autonomy to us and called our land as Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. And they promised us that they will respect all our rights and we will determine our future and our destiny.
Bizni besvağa vaqtida askarlarning ve onun aile tababatları bilen bulup aran 2% Xitaylarni götkep ekegan.
So when they occupied the East Turkestan, there were not a Chinese population. They were the families of the Chinese military who the Chinese authorities brought in to our land. And it constitutes only a few percent of the total population.
60 yıldan beri bunu bugünküçe biz abdunumu hukuk degenden söz etiş mümkün emas. Bir kümü demokratiya, erkinlik, kişilik hukuk degenden söz etiş mümkün emas. Bir kümü tinçlikka erişemedik.
So since 60 years of Chinese occupation, the Uyghur people were suffering, and they didn't, of course, keep their promises, and they violated all basic human rights of the Uyghur people and all the democratic rights of the Uyghur people, and my people didn't have a day of peace.
Uyghur halkı korkuş ve kaçan turmuğa ekte, kaçan öldüre, biz kaçan hayat kalamız diyen gün bilenle ömrümüz öttü.
And we have been suffering for 60 years, and all of my people have been living under a threat, under fear of being arrested or being detained or being executed by the Chinese authorities.
Berilgen abdunumu hukukunu qat'iy icra qilmadi.
So the Chinese authorities didn't carry out any of their promises, the promise of autonomy for my land.
Sen bergen abdunumu hukukunu icra qil deb tinchlik bilan talab qilgan rahbarlar, ziyolilar ve namoyishchilarning hammasi turmuga ilinib, oldi o'lim jazosi, keyni muddatli qamoq jazosi hukm qilindi.
The Uyghur intellectuals and political activists who demanded the Chinese authorities to respect their promises, and they keep their promises and they respect the rights of the Uyghur people, the rights of the human rights of the Uyghur people, or have been detained, have been executed, and suffered a lot under the in prisons.
Bularning hammasi aş bəgən avtonom hüquqni tələb qılğanlar idi.
They have been not asking anything more. They have been asking just the Chinese government promised my people.
Bizning oldi bilan iqtisodiy jihatdan taraqqiy qilish huquqimizni cheklab etdi.
So they take all the measures so we cannot further our economic developments.
Namiratlaştırgandan keyin muarif jihatdan cheklandik.
And they also take some measures that they, prevented our progress in our education.
Ondan keyin diniy e'tiqodimizni chekladi.
And they limited our religious freedom.
Ondan keyin ko'payish huquqimizni chekladi.
And also we didn't have even, they launched a birth control policy and limited our, having the children.
Ondan keyin madaniyatimizni taraqqiy qildirishni chekladi.
And also we try to destroy our national culture.
2003 yıldan başlap ana tilimizden bütünlay ma'arifdan qo'g'lab chiqib, til va yezikimiz cheklendi.
So in 2003, they launched a new policy in banned the Uyghur language as language of instructions at schools and universities.
Milyonlagan Xitoylarni yo'tkab chiqdi.
And Chinese authorities brought in millions of Chinese immigrants from mainland China and resettled them in East Turkestan and changed the demography of our country.
O milyonlagan Xitoylar yo'tkilib chiqsa-mu, biz bilan ittifoq birlikda baxtlik yashash emas, bizni yo'qotish badaliga.
So they brought all these Chinese immigrants to our land, not to live with us in peace, but the main goal of Chinese authorities was assimilate the Uyghurs and put them in minority in their own land.
Bütünlay bizni Xitoy bo'lishga majburladi.
So they try to make us Chinese and destroy our culture.
Kichik 14 yoshdan 16 yoshgacha bolalarimizni Xitoy o'lkalariga Xitoy tilida o'qishga majburiy yo'tkab ketildi.
And thousands of Uyghur children from 7 to 14, they transferred thousands of Uyghur children from East Turkestan to mainland China to assimilate them in Chinese culture.
2006 yıldan başlap 14 yaştan 25 yaşgacha to'y qilmagan 400 ming qizimizni yo'tkab ketdi.
And in 2006, they launched a new policy of transferring young Uyghur girl and women from East Turkestan to mainland China.
Bununla namoyish qilib, tinchlik bilan faoliyat etib bo'lgan. Mayli 97-yili, mayli 8-7 ayning 5-kuni ko'rdinglar, o'zining erkinligi, kishilik huquqi va avtonom huquq uchun namoyish qilgan Uyg'urlarning namoyishini to'planga o'zgartib, ularni qonliq bostirdi.
And the people who raised, their complaints and protested, and then complained about Chinese policies and speak out about the Chinese policy to transfer young Uyghur women and girls from East Turkestan to mainland China. They were arrested by Chinese authorities, and Chinese authorities suppressed brutally the peaceful demonstrations in 1997 and also the 5th July of 2009.
Men hozir sizlarga Uyg'urlarning o'zi yerlik millat bo'lgan bilan mayli ish o'rni yoki huquq yoki o'zining tarixini o'rganish huquqi yoki televizorlarda, chet ellardagi bir demokratiya radiolarni anglash huquqi bo'lmaydi. Shuni anglaganlarning hammasi turmaga tashlanadi.
So the situation is terrible. The Uyghur people don't have the right to speak out, to express their opinions, even to listen to the foreign broadcasts, to foreign radio stations.
Uyg'urlar turmaga elingandan keyin shu o'zining erkinligi uchun tinchlik bilan faoliyat qilgan 10 minglagan Uyg'urlar turmaga elinadi. Elinganlarning advokat taklif qilish huquqi bo'lmaydi, o'zini oqlash huquqi bo'lmaydi, xohlagancha o'lim jazosi va muddatsiz muddatli qamoq jazosi hukm qilinadi.
There is no due process. The Uyghurs who have been detained by the Chinese authorities don't have the right to have attorney, a lawyer to defend him at the courts, and the courts, the decisions are being made by political, leaders, not by the judges, and the Uyghurs are being sentenced to long term of prisons and even being executed and sentenced to death.
Ben bu kitabımı hakikaten Germaniyada gezildi. Ben sizlerle bu kitabımı neme için yazganlığımı aytip bermem.
So the book was published. This is the German version of my book was published first in Germany, and I would like to tell you why I decided to write this book.
Mınlıgan, 10 mınlıgan, milyonlugan Uyghur kızları, Uyghur balları xuddiymiş kitaptaki men.
So there are millions of Uyghur women and girls who have the same destiny as mine.
Men sizlerdek şunda parkta oturup o'qishni shunda arzu qilib kech-kechlab yig'ilgan. Faqat Uyghur bo'lib qolganligim uchun ana men sizlar o'qigan maktablarga kirib o'qish firstiga erishamadim.
When I was a child and was a young girl, I also wanted to be like you and study like you and sit at these university chairs and have studied at the universities.
Uyg'urlar faqat tarqaqlandirish, surgun qilish, turmug'i tutish, mushundaq davrini boshdan kechirdi.
But I didn't have that chance. The Chinese authorities didn't give and don't want to give the young Uyghur women and girls that chance you have here. So they constantly live in fear, in deportation, and suffering.
Men mushu 7 ay ichidagi ishni deb beray sizlarga.
I would like to tell you what happened in the last 7 months in my land.
30 milyondan ortiq odam yashaydigan Sharqiy Turkistonda butunlay internetda taqoqliq.
So in East Turkestan, which has a population of nearly to 30 millions, the Chinese authorities blocked all the internet access and telephone. They cut telephones.
1500'den artıq website taqılıb bütün website açqanlarının başlıqları turmuğa elindi.
They shut down more than 1,500 websites, the Uyghur websites, and they arrested all the people, all the editors of those websites.
Her qandaq Uyg'urni bastırış üçün terörist, milli bölgünçü degen qalpaqni kaydırdı.
They found a new excuse, a label as terrorists, extremists, and fundamentalists to suppress and crack down on Uyghurs.
Bu bizni bastırış üçün bizge 60 yıldan beri atap kevatkan gepler.
So they have been using these expressions since 60 years to suppress the Uyghur descent.
Endi Uyg'urlarning ahvoli, Uyg'urlar yani uningdan boshqa o'zining dunyoning hamma yeriga xohlagancha pasport elib chiqib ketolmaydi.
And the Uyghurs even don't have the right to get a passport to leave the country and travel abroad.
Öz vatanda asli xotirjam yashamaydi.
So they cannot live comfortably in their own land.
Shuning uchun men o'zimningki xalqimning ovozini dunyoga anglatish uchun men turmuş kirdim, u yerdan chiqdim. Men bu kitap bilan o'zimlam emas, mush bir millatning, mushu yer sharidagi bir millatning untinsiz, ovozsiz qandoq yo'qilayotganligini, qandoq ezilayotganligini dunyo xalqi uqsin deb men mush Germaniyalik Aleksandra xonimga o'zimning va xalqimning ahvolini o'zim bilan birga so'zlab berdim.
So I have been arrested in China and spent more than 5 years in prison because I spoke out against the Chinese policies toward my people. And when I released from the prison, I decided to write this book to introduce the situation of my people to the international community.
Mesela 10 minglap desem köp, 5'inler kabul kılanmaslıqlar mümkün. 2008 yılı, 1. ayının 18. Sot başlığının dünyaya özünün ilan kılığında Şarkı Türkistan'da milli bölgünçilerden biz 15 minini kolga aldık dep ilan kıldı.
The situation in my land is so terrible, and even you will not believe what's happening there if I tell you. Even in 2008, January 2008, the Supreme Court chief of the East Turkestan himself announced that they have arrested in the last 5 years 15,000 people, political prisoners, Uyghur political prisoners.
Muşu 7. ayının 5. günü tinchlik bilen çıkan namayişni Xitay hükümeti toplanğa özgertip 10 mingdan artık Uyghur şu bir akşamның içinde bastırılıp gayip bolup ketdi.
On 5th July 2009, there was a peaceful demonstration in Urumqi, and the Chinese authorities turned this peaceful demonstration into a bloody event and arrested thousands of people. Only in one night, more than 10,000 people have been disappeared.
Bütün yo'qolganlar to'liqsiz o'ttir maktab, to'liq o'ttir maktabning o'quvchilari ko'pincha qo'lga ilinib, yo'qolganlar ana shu etib o'ltirildi va bastırılıp o'ltirildi.
So most of the people who have been disappeared were the teenagers and students like you, the students of the universities.
Tinchlik bilan chiqqan bir namoyishni bastirish uchun Xitoy hukumatı maqsadlik to'polonga o'zgartdi.
So it was a peaceful demonstration, and Chinese authorities, in order to crack down that demonstration, suppress this demonstration, turned it and they provoked it and turned it into bloody event.
Mana endi hozir ta bugungacha 2 ay ichida o'zining dunyoga e'lon qilganligi, o'lim jazosiga hukm qildik dedi. 5 qitim o'lim jazosiga 2 ay ichida 28 odamni dunyoga e'lon qildi. Bu oshkor e'lon qilgan minglagan odamlar turmada urib o'ltirilyapti. Yo'qab har kuni Uyg'urlarning ichidan har kuni Sharqiy Turkistonda, ya'ni Xinjiang Uyg'ur avtonom rayonida har kuni 100lab, 200lab yoshlar g'oyib bo'lib ketadi.
So the Chinese authorities in the last 2 months sentenced 28 people to death, and they carried out more than 9 death sentences. And since then, hundreds of people have disappearing every day. The arrest and detention have been continued since then.
Mana bizlarni avtonom rayon kenslar bizning xalqimiz tinchlik avtonom rayon degan bilan bo'lgan ahvolni so'zlab berdim. Savolinglar bo'lsa bersanglar.
So you're also in autonomous region. You're enjoying the autonomy that was granted to you, and I'm very happy to be here today. And if you have any questions, I'm ready to answer.
Anglığınızға rahmet.
Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kadeer. I read in your book that you have a nickname when you were in the business. Your nickname was Janagir, which is a woman who seduces everywhere she goes. And we can understand now how true is this nickname, because we were all, I think, very fascinated by her. Before opening a discussion with the public, I will profit from my role by raising a first question. But please prepare your question, because the microphone will then collect your question. My first question is about the identity of the Uyghurs. We know that most of the Uyghurs are Muslims of Islamic faith, and that this has been also used by the Chinese authorities to somehow label the Uyghurs movement as separatist, independentist, but also fundamentalist. And you also say in your book that September 11 was a big problem for the entire world, but it was a defeat also for the Uyghurs movement. And again, on Islam and the Muslim faith, in your book you describe also the very strange, very odd relationship between the communism and Islam, how the communists succeeded in using Islam in order to force people to obey to the communist rules. And you describe also the story of this Imam Arunham. And so I would like to know a bit more about this, the Uyghurs' identity in terms of religion, and how this has also somehow was also a problem for the movement itself.
Meyli İslam dinde olsun, meyli Hristiyan dinde olsun, rahmet sizin eştaqığınız. Her kandak dinde qo'saqdaki tirik balını öldürüş bütün dinlarda bu karşı elinmaydı.
So, thank you very much for your questions. So, of course, every religion, whether it is Islam and Christianity, it's prohibit the abortion.
Lekin Xitay hükümeti bazen bizninki yalgan Müslümanlarını nahit çoğu ahın Müslüman kılıp çıkıp ulanı muşu dinde ballarınlarını, koskunlardaki ballarınlarını toğmanla öldürüp eliversenler buludu deyip sözlüdü.
So, Chinese authorities, of course, they train certain people as imams at the mosques, and they are at the mosque. They are preaching, you know, that it is not the sense. It doesn't matter if the abortion is allowed in the religion, so you can have abortion. So they actually, approve the government policies.
İki xil faydalanıdı. Biri, undaq beşiği səllini yögəp, undaq yalğan sözləydiğən Müslümanlarını açıq xalqın aldaydı. Yani biri, Uygurlar Müslüman boğalığı için terörist bastırdı.
So of course also Chinese authorities are using these imams to let the people to obey the policy, to approve the policy of the Chinese government. In one hand, in the other hand, they of course using the Islam to blame, to accuse the Uyghur movement, the Uyghur dissidents as fundamentalists and as terrorists.
Endi Uyghur Müslümanlarının en dini cihetten okugan, alım bop yetilgen ilmi Müslümanlarının hemisi turmuğu taşınıyordu.
So of course there are a lot of real imams who studied the Islam in different countries, and they are real know the Islam very well. Of course, all of them have been arrested by the Chinese, and they are spending long prison terms in prisons in East Turkestan.
Ulanın ismini terörist deyip ataydı, hiç mi değişimi yok.
So they are terrorists, they blame them as terrorists, accuse them as terrorists, and put them in jail.
Endi onundan sırt Ramazan ve namaz okuganlarını yaşlarının 18 yaşının tüvelleri meçitke kirgenler mektepten kovlap çıkarıldı.
So they say that they allow, the mosques are open, the government is respect rights of the religious rights, and there are no limitation for the religious activities. But in the reality, the education, the religious education for the children under 18 is prohibited, and the government employees, students, and teachers are not allowed to enter mosques, and they are not allowed to fast during the Ramadan.
Ramazanda her kanda hizmet orulları da harak ve yemekliklerini koyup koydu, onu yemek kirketkenler hizmetten kovulurdu.
So even the Chinese authorities organizing special events during the Ramadan, and they let the people eat during the day. So they are bringing even alcohol and every kind of things to let the people eat. If somebody refuses to eat, then he will be fired from his position.
Bizden halkımız muş adetteki bir resmi Xudağı bir tanıydıgan muşnaq yavaş bir Müslüman halk. Lekin Xitay hükümeti bu Müslüman degen bu isimni bizni bastırış için, yanı birisi bizgini aldaş için iki xil usulda işletidi.
So of course we are Muslims. The Uyghurs have a Muslim identity, but we are a moderate Muslims, but Chinese authorities have been using Islam and both for, approved his policies by the imams, and the other hand, to suppress us, to crack down on the Uyghurs as separatists and as terrorists.
Bu kitabımda bir imamның құлықını Uygurlar kesip ötüdü.
So of course, I tell a story in my book about an imam, which his ear was cut by some people in East Turkestan.
Sebep planlık tuğutta Xotullarının Qoskudaki ballarını öltəsi buludu dep meçitlerde sözleydi o imam.
Because he issued a fatwa, religious instruction to the people that it is allowed in religion. The abortion is allowed in Islam.
Nurgulluğun balılar, nurgulluğa anılar operasiyada ölüp ketkenlik üçün xalq gazaplanıp ketip aşık imamga aşnaq muamele qilgan.
So the people were very upset, and they punished him by cutting his ear.
I would like to ask the public now to.
Mrs. Kadeer, you have been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for 3 times, and from my view, you deserve it. Now in 2009, not you, but Barack Obama got that prize, and he's the most powerful man, maybe along with Hu Jintao, the most powerful man on the world. What do you expect him to do for peace and justice and the rights of the Uyghur people? And as far as you know, has he been addressing the issue of the Uyghur people, the political issue of Uyghur people in China, when he was visiting Beijing in recent months?
Koymadı. Uygurlar bugünkü öldürülüp atıdı.
As I told you, the Chinese authorities, continues to crack down on Uyghurs.
Kişilik hukuk şundak meyli Tibet olsun, meyli Uygur olsun, katlık depsendi babatıdı.
Of course, the human rights of Uyghurs as well as Tibetans are being violated severely.
Milli kırgınçılıkka culture genocide duş geldi.
So there is a cultural genocide going on in East Turkestan and in Tibet.
Biz şundak jığladık, şundak toğladık, bütün dünya bizni kutuldurmaz kendi.
So we have been trying very hard to convince the international community and the world leaders to condemn the brutality and the cultural destruction in our regions.
Lekin dünyanın Xitay hükümetinin iktisadi cihetdeki muamelesine karab, bizninki kişilik hukuk meselemiz oturup koyulmadı.
But our calls have been ignored because of the economic power of the Chinese government.
Adamimizni öldürüşlam emas, hatta neçe ming yıl tarixga ega bo'lgan asaratiqi Qashqarni chiqib tashlaganda shuningdimi biz ovozimizni anglitamadik dunyoga.
The Chinese authorities are not only executing and arresting the Uyghurs, but also they are destroying our culture. We tried very hard and asked the world to prevent the Chinese authorities from, demolishing the old city of Kashgar. The Chinese authorities destroyed a history in Kashgar, but the world was silent.
Nobel mükafatını bana berip etedi dep ansirap Norvegiya ve Nobel mükafаты komitetlerine Xitay hükümeti qattiq besim işletdi ve tehdit saldı. Her yılı eğer Rebiya Kadeer Nobel mükafatı berdigan bolsa, Norvegiya bilen ve şu devletler bilen bolgan münasebetini özümüzde tashqi ishlar ministri vaqirdi.
So we have been trying very hard to convince the international community and the world leaders to condemn the brutality and the cultural destruction in our regions.
Xitay hükümeti qattiq besim ishlatdi va tahdid soldi. Har yili agar Rebiya Kadeer Nobel mükafatı berdigan bolsa, Norvegiya bilan va shu davlatlar bilan bo'lgan munosabatimizni o'zimizda tashqi ishlar ministri vaqirdi.
Of course, I have been nominated 3 times for Nobel Peace Prize, but every time when I was nominated, the Chinese authorities were involved, and Chinese authorities were putting pressure on Norwegian government and also, Nobel Committee and also the governments in the region not to grant, not to give, award me with Nobel Peace Prize. Other there will be severe, repercussion from the Chinese side.
Nobel mükafatı tinchlik, sharaflik bir mukofot erkinlik uchun berilgan. Meningcha Obama hükümeti, Obama efendim bunu olgandan cho'qim buning o'disidan chiqish kerak va shuningga loyiq vazifani o'rindash kerak.
So of course the Nobel Peace Prize is very honored peace prize, and in 2009 President Obama, again the Nobel Peace Prize was given to President Obama, and I think he, by getting the Nobel Peace Prize, he also, now bear a more big responsibility in assuring the world that the human rights should be respected in every corner of the world.
7 ayının 5'ideki şundaq çoğun qırğınçılıqdı mı pozisiya bildirmedi.
But of course, a bloody incident happened in July 5th, and Chinese authorities arrested thousands of people. Hundreds of people have been killed in detentions, but there was no President Obama didn't raise his voice even in that period of time.
I would like to raise another question before maybe the public will think of another question. It's about the so-called kin state. In your book, you mentioned just once Turkey, and not very positively, I have to say, because you say that probably there was a sort of a hidden agreement between Turkey and China in order not to look at each other's minorities, so Kurds and Uyghurs and Tibetans. And we know also here in South Tyrol how important is for minority protection the role of a kin state. Here, for example, is the role of Austria. And you said also in your book that when you went to UN Congress of the United Nations for Women's Rights, you heard the first time the representatives of the Tibetans, you've seen how sort of powerful were, and how the Uyghurs instead were sort of alone. So how do you leave this sort of situation of being without a kin state, with so many countries refusing somehow the help because of the Chinese power, and probably you have very few countries on which you can count on. USA or maybe Canada, Norway. How is the relationship with the authorities, for example, also in Italy, when you come to visit these countries? So a sort of network of friends that can support your movement.
ijobiy emas deydi Turkiya haqida. Chunki Turkiyaniki Xitoy bilan kelishim qilib ularning kirklarni bostirishida gap qilmaydigan, bu Xitoy bizni bostirsa Turkiyaga qilmaydigan shunday qilibsiz deydi. Lekin bu bir davlatlarniki bunlar qo'llab chiqishi nima muhim deydi. Endi Amerikada bu endi bu Tibetlarniki kongress bo'lsin, boshqa yerlarda bo'lsin, Tibetlarniki shunday qo'llanayotganligi, Uyg'urlarning qo'llamayotganligini bu nima sabablar bor. Undan yana birsi deydi, bu hukumatlarniki pozitsiyasi nima deydi. Bu qanday qilasiz, bu qo'llashni qanday qo'lga keltirasiz. İtalya hükümeti mesela nima qilyapti deydi, Amerika qo'llayotgan.
Biz burunqiga nisbatan mushu 5 bo'libmi, mush 5-6 yildan beri Amerika hukumati va G'arb dunyosi va Italiya hukumati bizning ishimizni qo'llayotadi.
So of course, since 5 or 6 years, the Western countries, the US and also European countries, and including Italy, has been supportive for the Uyghur cause.
Burun biz özümüz anlatamadık çünkü Xitay bizning qattiq kontrol qilib sirtqa chiqarmaganligi uchun.
So before that, there was no support for us in the West, because the reason was that there were no Uyghurs to introduce the issue to the Western public, because Chinese were controlling strictly the Uyghurs, and they didn't allow the Uyghurs to come out of the countries and go to the Western countries and resettle there.
Ben hazırgıçı tek Türkiye'ye kirmedim.
So I have not been able to visit Turkey yet.
Burun bana Türkiye vize vermegen.
So a few years ago, Turkey, of course, rejected my application for a visa application.
Lekin bu qitim 7 ayının 5'deki vakadan keyin Türkiye hükümeti dünyanın ait qattiq Xitayga qattiq pozitsiya bildirdi.
But during the 5th July incident, when that incident happened, the Turkish authorities, the Turkish government took a very strong stand against the Chinese government.
Lekin muşunun davamlışını ümit qilman.
So I hope that this position of Turkey will continue, and it will continue to support the Uyghurs.
İtalya Radikal Partisi
The Italian authorities
ve başka orullar ve neşriyatlar, ziyaliler ve parlamentleri xeyli yaxshi bizni qo'llayotdi. Endi Amerika bulup mu Amerika Kongresi, Avrupa Parlamenti biz to'g'rili qonun loyiha chiqadi. Asta bizning masalamizni tushunib, hozir yordam qilishga boshladi.
So also Italian authorities and also some, NGOs in Italy are supporting us. We are very grateful for that. And also the US government also have been supporting us, and the European Union as well. And European Union recently adopted a resolution condemning the Chinese policy in East Turkestan.
Prezident Bush bu vaqtida bizni Aqsarayga akirib, ahvolimizni Aqsarayda qabul qilib oldi.
And during the Bush administration, as I was, invited twice to White House and met with President Bush.
I would very like know, how do you get news from your country meanwhile you are here in Europe traveling? Thank you.
How do you get information from your country?
Amma narsa etik, amma shu sirtqa chiqqanlardan, sirtdan kirganlardan orqali xabar ola olyapmiz.
So as I have told you, all the communication lines are cut, but we are getting information from the people who are, coming from our land abroad, visiting abroad, traveling abroad.
Benim 2 balam turmada, 3 balam nazaret astida, 7 nevrem mektepten qo'g'langan, hatta uylarini tatib balalarımni qo'g'lab chiqiribdi. Shularning hozir nadligini uqmayman, xabarini o'zimning oilasidan kirib olamadim.
So of course, 2 of my children are in prison, and 3 of them are under Chinese surveillance, and my extended family have been kicked out from their houses, and 9 of my grandchildren were kicked out from the schools, and I have been trying to contact them, and since many months I've not been able even to communicate with them, to speak with them.
6 qavat bir, 7 qavat bir binarim var. Bunun da 2000'den artık Uyghur savdogarlar yaşaydı.
I have a department store in Urumqi, and there were about 2,000 Uyghurs doing business in that department store.
Binanı hazır bikalap bütün savdogarlarni qo'g'lab chiqiribdi. Ularning taqdirining qanday bo'lganligini uqmayman.
And Chinese authorities, in order to take revenge for my activities, evacuated my department store and kicked out all of the people who have been doing business there. So even I don't know what happened to them. So I don't have any communication with them.
I've got two questions. First, apart from Turkey, what kind of support and how much help do you get from other Muslim countries in the world? And the second question, what do you hope to achieve for your cause and for your people by visiting our region here?
Biz dünyaya emde anlatıvatımız, İslam dünyasıga emde anlatıvatımız belki emde bundan keyin yardım qilish mümkün.
So as I told you, we have been, very new our cause to the world. So now I hope that the more Islamic country, as they find out what's happening in our land, will support our cause.
Lekin G'arb dünyası bizga yaxshi yordam qilib qo'llayapti hozir ishimizni.
And as in Western countries were very supportive, and we are very grateful of them.
Yeterlik darajada bo'lmasimi, ish qilib har holda yaxshi.
So the support, I'm telling you that they are supportive, but it's not enough, of course. We want them to do more.
Endi bu bir avtonom rayon ekan. Bizmi bir avtonom rayon bo'g'li 60 yil bo'ldi. 50 yil bo'ldi.
So this South Tyrol is an autonomous region, is a very successful autonomous region, and we have been also an autonomous region, our region, for 60 years.
Bir selishtirib ko'rish.
So I wanted to just compare the situation here with the situation in my homeland.
Ikkinchi, mening xalqimning ahvolini anglatish va bularning xalqining yordamiga erishtirish.
Secondly, I wanted to explain the situation of my people to the people here, to you, and get your support as well.
Hem alaydiligini o'rganish.
And also I wanted to know to get more detailed information how it became so successful autonomous region, and I wanted to learn more about that.
Çünkü aldıda bizning taqdirimiz bor.
So because we have also, as I told you, is autonomous region.
Madam Kadeer, you have been a very successful businesswoman and you were a member of the People's Parliament in China. From your experience, you have known the system from within. From your experience, what would be the most effective measures that we in the West can take to help your cause at a political level or economic level or as NGOs or as civil society?
G'arb dunyosi Xitoyga davomli holda Xitoy bilan suhbat o'tkazgan vaqtida iqtisodning birinchi o'ringa qo'yib olyapti hozir. Kishilik huquqni birinchi o'rin qo'yib, har qanday xalq o'zining hukumatiga shu bizga o'xshash ezilgan millatlarning kishilik huquq masalasini shu yerlik hukumatlar davomli suhbat o'tkazganda oldingi o'ringa qo'yish kerak.
So I would like that the Western countries and the authorities of the Western countries, when they met the Chinese authorities, they should, without any hesitation, raise the human rights issues before they discuss the economic relations with China.
Davomli o'zining kun tartibiga, masalan, shu hukumat o'zining tashqi siyosatiga, masalan, mayli Tibet masalasi, mayli Uyg'ur masalasi, tashqi siyosatiga kirgizishni xalq talab qilish kerak, parlamentlarda qonun ma'qullash kerak.
In order, of course, to force the governments to do that, the public should be, should know the situation, and the people should put pressure on their governments to help the people, the Uyghurs, and they ask their governments, to raise the human rights issues of the Uyghurs and Tibetans when their leaders met the Chinese authorities.
Hiç bo'lmaganda bularning kishilik huquqi bilan madaniyatini qutqizib qilish uchun qonun ma'qullab Xitoy hukumatiga davomli oldiga qo'ysa, Xitoy hukumati bu ehtiyot qiladi, dunyo aralashgan ish bo'lgandan keyin bundaq oshkor qilishni to'xtatadi.
So if the issue raised by the Western authorities, the government authorities, when they met the Chinese leaders, then China will take care, will be very careful in dealing with the Uyghurs, and because they will know that the public, the international community is aware of the situation, and the people know what's happening there.
Özаңларның hükümetiga sizlardek o'quvchilar imzo to'plab, biz to'g'riliq qonun tuzab, Xitoy hukumatiga bizni bostırishni to'xtatish, to'g'riliq talab qilishni hukumatga va parlamentga aytsanglar, bular ijro qiladi.
The grassroots movements will be very effective if the university students, even as you organize themselves and ask your governments, to raise the issue of the Uyghurs and adopt some resolution in parliament and in regarding the Uyghurs, it be very effective. The Chinese government will be very careful then in dealing with the Uyghurs.
Siz yuqorida aytdınız, Xitoyning siyosatini bilisizlar. Xitoy hukumati xalqaro haqiqiy aralashadigan bo'lsa, bizni bundaq yo'qitib o'tmaydi, ham bostirib o'tmaydi.
If the international community takes seriously the issue of the Uyghurs, China will not dare to continue its brutal crackdown in our country.
Gözünü yumup turvasa, xalığan çıksam dünya işimi demeydi iken de bunu köydünler 2 ay içinde 28 adamını dünyaya ilan kılıp attı. Kambodja'da 20 adamımızın eketti. Yani 3 günün aldı 18 adamımızın eketti. Sırtka keçip çıkan hiç kandak günahı yok. Biçare Saudiyalarını tutup ekitvadı.
Because of the ignorance of the international community on the July 5th incident, because they were silenced, the Chinese authorities felt free to do whatever they wanted, and they arrested whatever people they wanted, and during last months they sentenced 28 people to death, and also very aggressively pursue a policy in influencing, put pressure on the neighboring countries, and force the Cambodian government to return 20 Uyghurs who were involved in July 5th incident back to China. And also recently we heard that the Chinese authorities forced the Burma government to return 18 Uyghurs back to China, Uyghur refugees back to China.
I have a question, if I may. The question is about the relationship between human rights and fundamental freedoms and the legitimate aim of prevention of terrorism and security and the unity of a country. So this problem of finding a balance between these two issues, human rights and also security concerns, are common also in other regions of the world. Just to mention a few, the problem of the Kurds in Turkey, or the Chechens in Russia, or in Spain with the Basque countries in Northern Ireland, and so on. So how to find, and there is always this debate about how to find a balance between security concern, prevention of terrorism, and human rights and fundamental freedom. Where is the sort of equilibrium, or what is the recipe, let's say, to find this balance?
Aldı bilen şu devlet karakterlik terörizminin özünün ölçümünü bekitiş gerek. Mesela diktatör devletler kandak terörizm yaptırıvatıdı. İzleyen milletlerge, özünün halkıga kandak terörizm yaptırıvatıdı. Aşının gibi bir ölçem veriş gerek.
So of course, the world, the international community, the world should find a balance between the respecting the human rights, preventing the terrorism, insecurity. But in Chinese case, there is no balance, of course. They are using, terrorism as a pretext to suppress dissent and to suppress the Uyghur movement.
Kural kötəgənlə adam terrorizm dep qaralmay, zadi kural kötürüşki kim mecbur kıldı? Endi devlet derecelik kandak Xitaylam emas, devlet derecelik terrorizm yapıp atqanlar, kandak ezilgen milletler nemi sebepten kötədi? Bu narsani tep çıkış gerek.
And also there is no armed movement even. There is no armed movement in Uyghur region. There are always peaceful demonstrations. They didn't took any arm in their hands. And also still the China is continuing to crack down. And some people also in some points there are armed struggles, and there is also a state terrorism in China. So people should pay attention to that.
Terrorizm degen ölçemni, mesela devlet derecelik ölçem, şu ölçemden koşuyor.
I have then another question about you said that in an interview that you hope for the Uyghurs' human rights and fundamental freedoms, not only for the Uyghurs but also for the Chinese people. So my question, which is connected also with the Google case, the fact that some unknown hackers have violated the emails of some Chinese human rights activists, and probably the Chinese authorities are behind, and now there is the sort of so-called Google case, so that even Hillary Clinton has intervened in this case. So my question is whether you can, whether there are any links, or you foresee a link between your movement and the other Chinese human rights movements, whether this can be useful as sort of a useful network to aiming for the human rights in China in general.
Elbette bizim münasebetimiz var. Meyli Mongollların, Tibetlerin ve kişilik hukuk teşkilatlarının halkara ondan başka Xitaylarının demokratiya, meyli Tiananmen'in teşkilatları, meyli Falun Gong, meyli demokratiya bulanın hemisi bilen bizim ortaklığımız var dedi.
So we have, of course, we have very close connection, close contact with the Tibetan movements, or Mongolian movement, and as well as the Chinese human rights movements. So they are very useful for our cause as well. Yeah.
Münasebetimiz var. Biz ula hem de Xitaylarınki demokratiya, kişilik hukuk teşkilatları, Uygurlarının hakiki ahvalını Xitay bizni, Xitay halkıga terörist, bölgünçü dep Xitay halkı bilen oturumuzga zidiya selip ulanın kolu bilen öldürüp atıdı hazır. Özüdün başka. Lekin muşula bizden hakiki ahvalımızdan düşendirdiler.
So Chinese authorities have been, accusing the Uyghurs as terrorists, introducing the Uyghurs as terrorists, as separatists to the Chinese people. And this created a hatred between the Han Chinese and Uyghurs. And of course, China also using this, to suppress the Uyghurs. Of course, the Chinese human rights organizations, Chinese democratic organization, is very useful in introducing the Uyghurs, the real situation of the Uyghurs, to the Chinese people, and getting their support as well to the cause.
I have to ask you another question about the East Turkestan Islamic movement, the group that has been classed by the United Nations and USA as a terroristic organization, and you always deny any links. But how do you see this movement, and what do you think about also the situation of the Guantanamo prisoners who have been accused and then released actually Many of them were actually detained without justification, and some of them were moved to Palau or to Albania. What is your thoughts about this movement?
Bizning adamlarımız bir keşip çıksa özümüzün qarindaşları Qozog'iston, Qirg'iziston, O'zbekistonga keşip chiqdi. Faqat chegara pasportlarimiz yaman qattiq kontrol qilingan ekan.
Of course, many Uyghurs fled China to the neighboring countries like Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan because of Chinese persecution.
Xitoylarning o'zininki 2003 yili 3 ayning 5 kuni e'lon qilgan gazetida Rebiya deganda 10 ming odam namoyish qilsa 60 ming odamning qo'lga ilinganligini e'lon qilgan Uyg'urlarning.
So in Chinese newspaper, Rebiya, I think Ms. Kadeer says, in 2003 published an article, and they said in the article it was mentioned that 10,000 people demonstrated, but 60,000 people were arrested by the Chinese authorities.
Demek Uygurlar aşında cenini kutulduruz için kaşıdı kaşka vaxtıda Qozog'iston, Qirg'izistonda ma tarafimizda chegara Pakistan, Afg'oniston tağdan atlapla tushib ketalaydi. Tibet, Hindistonga tushib ketalaydi, biz u tarafga tushib ketalaymiz. Bular cenini ep qaşqandan keyin qo'lda pasport bo'lmagandan keyin, inglizcha bilmagandan keyin ularning orasiga kirib qolmaydi deyamaymiz deydi.
So many people, after every Chinese crackdown, when China launched a strike hard policy, many people had to flee. Many Uyghurs had to flee China in order to save their lives. So they, as I told you, they will flee to Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and they will flee to Afghanistan and Pakistan, which is neighboring countries. And some of them may be, involved in these, movements.
Çünkü o chegara tağdan atlapla chiqalaydi.
So it is very easy to flee from East Turkestan to Afghanistan, because if you cross the mountains, then you are in Afghanistan.
O özünü cenini kutulduruş için ularning kampisiga kirib qolganligi ras.
So some of them, in order to save their life, in Afghanistan, for example, they involved in such activities and attended their camps.
Şuna ularni tutqandan keyin Amerika bunu haqiqiy mushunda tekshirib, ularning bunda terrorist emas, özünü kutulduruş için chiqib ashak kirib qolganligini aniqlab chiqdi.
So the people who were, detained in Afghanistan and taken to the Guantanamo was the people. The Uyghurs were people who were on the wrong place at the wrong time, and of course the U.S. government investigated, interrogated all of them for many years. They spent, many years without, any, as they were innocent. They spent many years. And at the end, the U.S. government decided that they were, innocent, that they didn't have anything to do with the terrorist movements.
And şunun arasından bir neçe adamlarning chiqib, mushunda qilsak vatanni qutuldurdiga o'xshaymiz deb bunda qilmaydimi delamaymiz. Ya 10 ya 5 o adam o bizga vakillik qilolmaydi.
Maybe there are, of course, there are a movement, as you said. Maybe there are some people involved in that movements, but we don't have any kind of connections or links whatsoever with these kind of organizations.
Are you afraid of a new attack on you from Chinese government or agents?
So I think China will try to, attempt any attack on my life, but I'm not afraid of that.
another question.
I would like to know something about the political situation in China. Is the government in China really so weak or unstable that it fears when it gives some autonomy, some real autonomy to some minorities like China, like Tibet or the Uyghur minority, that it could have effects on the political stability in China itself?
Whether the reaction of the Chinese government seems that the Chinese government is weak, so that they fear from the autonomy of Tibet or Uyghurs.
Xitoy hukumati deydi shu nimadaiki deydi o'zininki bir misharik vaziyatdan deydi Sharq Turkiston Tibetdagi vaziyatdan deydi aytaki siyosiy nimaga ta'sir yetkazdi alligidan deydi qo'rqish mumkinmi deydi qo'rqindi.
Şu qo'rqqanligi uchun bastırıp atıp deydi. Özünü özü guman qılıp bastırıp atıp hazır beka gunansız adamlarni. Şu her vaqt qo'rqib turdi. Bular şöyle o'xshamag'achqa bizning milliy kimligimiz.
So of course the Chinese leaders are afraid of a situation here. If the situation get worse in these regions, that will affect the political and destiny of the Chinese leaders.
Çünkü diktatör qo'llanib bergandan xalqning qarshi chiqadi-da uningga.
But if the Chinese authorities continue its policies, stick to its policies which has been pursuing for many years, the situation will get worse. They have to do something to solve the problem.
Ularning mavjudligini tahdid deb qaraydi. Bizning mavjudligimizni, mavjud bo'lib turishimizni, milliy kimligimizning tahdid deb qaraydi.
So now Chinese authorities, but according to my opinion, Ms. Kadeer says, Chinese authorities doesn't want to solve the problem. They see the Uyghurs, the existence of the Uyghurs, as a threat to themselves.
If there is some time left, just a question regarding your family. As I know, there are some more children, some more sons of you who are actually in jail in Xinjiang, East Turkestan. What do you know about them, and what's about the rest of your family, if your children still living in Xinjiang? And your sons Alim and Ablikim have as we are talking now, are in jail over there. Have you got any possibility to visit, to have contacts with them?
Sizlar ko'rdinglar, shu 7 ayning 5-idan keyin mening bolalarimni va tuqqanlarimning, nevaralarimni hammasini televizorga ochib, butun dunyoga so'zlatkizib, meni tillatqizdi.
As you may aware, the Chinese authorities, after the July 5th incident, in the aftermath of July 5th incident, forced my children to show up in front of the cameras and televisions and condemn that I was the instigator of the incident.
Bir onaning bir balani televizorlarga chiqib tillaydigini bizning oila axloqimizda mana hech qanday yerda yo'q.
Of course, it is very unusual. It is against our tradition that a child come up and condemn his mother or his father.
Endi 12 yoshga kirgan nevramni tillatqizdi.
Even one of my grandchildren, who was 12 years old, were brought up, and came up and condemned me.
Yana turmudagi oblikim olim degan ikki balamni majburlab, shuning ichidan olim degani chiqib televizorda meni tilladi.
And also they also forced 2 of my sons who are in prison because of my activities in the West to come up to the cameras, show up in front of the cameras and condemned me and my activities. But one of them, Alim, show up, but the other, the Ablikim, didn't.
Ablikim unumaptı belki bastırıp taşlagan buluş mümkün.
So according to my information, because he rejected to condemn me, he was punished severely in prison.
Lekin menin qeyrindaşlarımның, ballarımның, nəvirlərimның tillığını əmmisi ulanın məcburi təhdid astıda qılıb atqanlığını mən bilmə.
Of course, all my brothers, my grandchildren, my children condemn me, but I know that they were forced by the Chinese authorities to do so.
Əndə ulanın əhvalını aşındaq.
So their situation is terrible.
Öydün qoğlab çıxadı.
These are the last question.
I wanted to know what are your contacts to the Dalai Lama and if his politics defending the Tibetan people is also an advantage for your people, for the Uyghurs.
Əlbəttə deyil ben. Alaqımız var, davamlıq birlikdə iş qılımız. Bizning etpağan fəaliyyətimiz ulağa faydası var, ulağının mı bizge faydası var?
So of course we have very close contact with His Holiness Dalai. I have very close contact with His Holiness Dalai Lama. We met several times in the past and discussed our common issues. And of course, we support each other in every occasion.
Bu 50 yıl özü çıqqan 50 yıl içində biz avazımızı anlatamağa vaxtımızdı mı? Bizning davamlıq bir yerdə dəbt oldu.
So when we were very weak, we didn't have the chance to, to introduce our cause to the international public. He was very supportive. He introduced Tibetan cause and as well as the Uyghur cause to the world. So we are grateful for his help and support.
Please, the very, very short question because Mrs. Kadeer needs also rest.
Rebiya Kadeer, you are a member of the transnational radical party of Emma Bonino and Marco Pannella. Why did you decide to join this party?
Bizni hiç qandaq adam tunumğanda Avrupa Parlamentdə Radikal Partiyası tunup, bizning bütün şu Avrupa Parlamentdagi işlerimizden keng ko'lamda qo'llashga erishishga asos salgan va bizga o'xshash ezilgan mayli Tibet olsun, mayli biz bulayli Radikal Partiyasi davomli ezilgan millatlar masalasiga intayin taqdiriga aralashadi.
So I'm an honor member of this party. So I decided to be a member because the Radical Party was the party who supported, our cause and brought our cause to the, European Parliament, and they let them discuss our issues in that Parliament in international forum when we was very weak and we didn't have the chance to do that by our own. And this party has been supporting also the causes of the other national minorities like Tibetans and others.
Aşı hiç qandaq millatlarla Birleşken Devletler Teşkilatı aralashmagan, ko'ngil bölmeydigan, unutup ketken, çatığı bulmay taşlab etken, bizge o'xshash uşak ovozini anlatamagan har qandaq millatning ishlariga aralashib, uning taqdirini alayda berib hal qilib, o'zi shundaq rolni o'ynaydi.
So this party has been, of course, as I told you, has been very supportive for the other national minorities, and they even, try to bring the issues of the other national minorities into the international institutions.
Şuna men o partiye kiriştim, parlament başlığının ismini hazır degan unutup kaldım. O kişiye salamımı yollayayım.
So I'm very grateful for their help and also for their leadership.
Ular bilen mu bizem birlikte şu faaliyetini kollayma.
Of course, I'm very grateful for their support.
Okay, I apologize for those who also asked for questions, but our time has really come to an end. I would like just to conclude with the words of one of my co-regional, Antonio Gramsci, who happened to be the founder of the Italian Communist Party and who died in jail as a political prisoner during the fascist regime, who from jail says, I'm pessimist with the intellect and I'm optimist with the will. And I think this is also what maybe we should think of the Uyghurs movement. And I wish to thank Rebiya Kadeer for her precious and illuminating words on the Uyghurs situation. I would also like to recall that this evening at the Film Club there is the screening of the documentary film 10 Conditions of Love, followed by a discussion with Mrs. Kadeer. And I hope that at EURAC and here in this region that is so famous for the history of minorities accommodation, Rebiya Kadeer can find somehow a second home